Forget what the history books tell you. Some of the truest, wildest stories about World War II were smuggled onto movie screens in the 1980s. But here's the twist. A bunch of them were buried by Hollywood politics, box office flops, or just plain bad luck. So, which hidden gems do real historians actually respect? And which serious war films secretly took more risks than you'd ever guess? Let's dig into 15 films that changed the way we see the world's most brutal conflict. The Big Red One, 1980. You want the war as it really happened? Samuel Fuller didn't just direct The Big Red One, he lived it. Before he ever touched a camera, Fuller fought his way across Europe with the U.S. Army's legendary 1st Infantry Division. When Hollywood finally let him tell his story, he didn't hold back. Lee Marvin, still limping from real war wounds, leads a ragtag squad of GIs through the mud and madness of every major WWII front. What you get is chaos. Real explosions, Israeli soldiers doubling as extras, scenes shot in the scorching heat of Israel and the rain of Ireland, and a script that shreds the heroic arc you expect from war movies. The studio butchered Fuller's original 4-hour cut, but even what survived feels raw and unscripted, packed with moments where Marvin hardly seems like he's acting at all. The film jumps from North Africa to D-Day, to the liberation of concentration camps, but never lets you feel comfortable. You never know who's going to make it or who's going to snap under the pressure. Critics didn't know what to do with this movie at first. Years later, Scorsese himself called it one of the most authentic war films ever made. If you want the ugly, unpredictable truth about what combat actually feels like, The Big Red One doesn't just deliver, it marches it right up to your front door. Das Boot, 1981. You've seen every kind of war movie? Think again. Das Boot isn't just a submarine film, it's a masterclass in tension, sweat, and fear. Set deep below the Atlantic waves, Wolfgang Petersen's German-language epic with huge backing from American and British distributors traps you inside a U-boat with a crew that's desperate, hungry, and running on fumes. Forget glorious battles. Here, you get rattling pipes, dripping water, and the sound of depth charges closing in, closer every minute. Everything is shot in cramped sets, so tight, actors had to squeeze sideways just to get through scenes. You'll start to feel the claustrophobia in your own living room. Petersen obsessed over every detail, using handheld cameras to create the feeling that the boat itself is alive and ready to implode. The film doesn't paint its German crew as cartoon villains or heroes, just doomed men trying to stay alive as the odds stack up. The captain isn't a legend, he's a guy losing sleep and hope with every passing hour. When the end finally comes, it doesn't matter what side you're on. All you feel is exhaustion and relief that you made it out alive, if only for a moment. For years, naval historians and real submariners have called Das Boot the most realistic sub-movie ever made. And after sitting through its storm of noise, darkness, and panic, you'll believe it. Empire of the Sun, 1987. If you ever thought World War II was only a story of soldiers and generals, Empire of the Sun blows that myth to pieces. Spielberg's epic drops you into the chaos of war-torn Shanghai, seen through the eyes of a British schoolboy ripped away from his comfortable life and thrown into a Japanese internment camp. Christian Bale, in his first big role, delivers a performance so raw you forget he's acting. Spielberg, always the showman, recreates pre-war Shanghai with staggering detail, even building a full airfield and convincing the Chinese government to let him shoot where no Hollywood crew had gone before. But there's nothing glossy about this movie. The bombs are real, the fear is constant, and every adult looks as lost as the kids. Behind the camera, Spielberg wrangled hundreds of extras, wrung performances out of John Malkovich and Miranda Richardson that still sting and nearly broke under the pressure. Critics at the time gave it polite applause, but didn't see the classic hiding in plain sight. Now, historians praise the film for showing the psychological toll of internment, not with speeches, but with haunted eyes and half-whispered conversations. Empire of the Sun isn't just about surviving bombs and barbed wire. It's about losing everything and finding something strange and defiant left inside you, even when the world falls apart. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983. A POW camp, two enemies, and a showdown no Hollywood writer could have imagined. That's Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. David Bowie, trading his stage lights for the harsh sun of a Japanese prison camp, goes head-to-head with Ryuichi Sakamoto in a psychological battle that feels as unpredictable as real war. Unlike most WWII films, this one doesn't care about good guys and bad guys. Instead, it's all about culture clash, power games, and the weird bonds that form under pressure. The director, Nagisa Oshima, took British funding and turned out a film that critics are still arguing over. Bowie, refusing to rehearse and demanding every take feel brand new, gives a performance that's half mystery, half emotional breakdown. His final silent confrontation with his captors, just a look, not a word, has been called one of the most haunting scenes ever filmed. Filmed in the blazing heat, with cast and crew clashing over every creative choice, the production nearly fell apart. But the result is a movie that's as much about what's not said as what is. Historians dig this one because it throws away the usual war cliches and digs into the psychological torment, the awkward camaraderie, and the unexpected humanity that surfaced even in the worst places. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence doesn't make war noble. It makes it strange and unforgettable. The Eagle Has Landed, 1980. Espionage, sabotage, and a Nazi plot so wild it could almost be true. The Eagle Has Landed is what happens when a British war movie throws away the stiff upper lip and gets down in the mud. Donald Sutherland is nearly unrecognizable as a German agent sent on a suicide mission to kidnap Winston Churchill in rural England. The story is ripped from Ken Follett's best-selling novel, but director John Sturges and his British cast bring a grittiness that feels a world away from most sanitized war films. The production was chaos, shot on storm-lashed Scottish islands, with cast and crew battling floods, fog, and real-life cliffhanger moments. Sutherland himself nearly tumbled off a cliff and kept acting anyway. The movie doesn't hold your hand or pick sides. Germans are clever, Brits are suspicious, and everyone's just trying to stay alive one more day. Two major actresses even walked off the project over the film's grittier scenes, but that just made room for Kate Nelligan's breakout performance. With set pieces that use real explosives and vintage military gear, The Eagle Has Landed turns what could have been just another caper into a nerve-wracking thriller. Historians respect it for refusing to turn the story into cartoon heroics and for highlighting the real, sometimes overlooked, cat-and-mouse operations of the war. One thing's for sure. In this movie, nobody gets out clean. Fat Man and Little Boy, 1989. You want to see the atomic age born in front of your eyes? Fat Man and Little Boy delivers the origin story of the world's most dangerous weapons without sugarcoating a thing. Forget easy answers. This is the story of the Manhattan Project, as told through the tangled partnership of Paul Newman's gruff General Groves and Dwight Schultz's haunted J. Robert Oppenheimer. These aren't smooth heroes. They're real men, weighed down by the secrets and the second-guessing that came with building the bomb. Director Roland Joffé fought with the studio over everything. How much horror was too much? How much truth was too ugly for the audience? The result is a film that feels almost nervous about its own power, daring you to ask what's justified in the name of victory. Budget overruns, bitter creative fights, and a disastrous box office run made this film an underdog from the jump. But historians and critics keep coming back to it, not because it makes you comfortable, but because it refuses to let you off the hook. The scenes of scientists debating, sweating, and sometimes breaking under the weight of their work are as tense as any battlefield. Even Paul Newman admitted years later that the film haunted him, not for its explosions, but for its questions. If you think World War II was all simple heroism, Fat Man and Little Boy is here to argue back, and maybe keep you up at night. Hope and Glory, 1987. Most war movies follow the soldiers to the front lines. Hope and Glory does the opposite, showing you the Blitz through the eyes of a London schoolboy whose world is exploding in more ways than one. John Borman's semi-autobiographical film trades battlefields for backyards, focusing on the bombed-out streets, scrambled school days, and wild adventures that defined childhood in wartime England. The camera doesn't shy away from the terror, air raids, firestorms, families huddling in shelters, but it also captures something no other war film does: the absurd freedom and even joy that can break through in the worst circumstances. Borman's script bubbles with dark humor and sly commentary, turning what could have been a grim survival story into a raucous coming-of-age comedy. The performances are pitch perfect, especially young Sebastian Rice Edwards as Billy, who navigates the chaos with curiosity instead of fear. Critics loved the film's honesty and the way it captured both the terror and the resilience of ordinary people. Real historians praise its street-level authenticity: the destroyed houses, the backyard games played under the threat of bombs, the way life carried on, stubbornly, no matter what the Luftwaffe threw at them. Hope and Glory doesn't just recreate the past, it invites you to live in it, if only for a couple of wild, unforgettable hours. The Killing Fields, 1984. World War II didn't end with a surrender ceremony. It left scars that ripped across continents for decades. The Killing Fields isn't a classic battle epic. It's a brutal, necessary look at what happened next, as seen through the eyes of two real-life journalists caught in Cambodia's nightmare aftermath. The war may be over for the West, but for Dith Pran and Sidney Schanberg, survival is a minute-by-minute battle. British director Roland Joffé films the chaos with a newsman's eye. Nothing is polished, everything is raw, from the overcrowded camps to the desperate escapes across flooded jungles. John Malkovich and Sam Waterston turn in career-defining performances. But it's Dr. Hein S. Nagore, a real survivor of the Khmer Rouge, who steals the show, reliving trauma to give the film its soul. Shot on location in Thailand, using Cambodian refugees as extras, the movie refuses to sanitize anything. Critics and historians praise it for documenting not just the violence, but the silence that followed, the way entire countries can simply vanish into fear. Some say it's too much. Most agree it's essential viewing, especially if you want to understand how the Second World War's aftershocks still shake the world today. The Killing Fields is less a movie than a warning. Peace doesn't always mean safety. Escape from Sobibor, 1987. Imagine facing impossible odds, then breaking the unbreakable. Escape from Sobibor tells one of the most staggering true stories of the Holocaust: how a handful of prisoners organized the only successful mass breakout from a Nazi death camp. Made for television but filmed with the grit and urgency of a big-screen thriller, this UK-US co-production brings together an international cast led by Alan Arkin and Rutger Hauer. The filmmakers didn't have the budget of a blockbuster, but what they had was heart and nerve. The camp was recreated in excruciating detail, down to the mud, barbed wire, and terror in every frame. Real survivors advised on set, and the film stays remarkably true to the facts, even when those facts are almost too harrowing to believe. The tension doesn't let up for a second. You feel the clock ticking as the prisoners lay their plans, risk everything, and finally burst through the gates in a frenzy of hope and chaos. Critics praise the movie for avoiding melodrama and letting the story's raw courage speak for itself. Historians still show it in classrooms today, not because it's easy to watch, but because it proves what's possible, even when all hope seems lost. Escape from Sobibor is less about escape than about the courage to fight back, no matter the odds. A Midnight Clear, 1988. Most war movies want big explosions and clear-cut heroes. A Midnight Clear wants you to feel the cold, the confusion, and the quiet fear of being trapped on the wrong side of the front. Set in the frozen forests during the Battle of the Bulge, this little-known American gem drops a squad of GIs into a game of psychological chess with a group of German soldiers who want to surrender but are terrified of their own side. Based on William Wharton's novel, which was inspired by real events, the film trades bloodshed for suspense and suspicion. There's almost no music, just the crunch of snow, the snap of twigs, and the low murmur of young men who suddenly realize nobody's really in control. Ethan Hawke leads a cast of actors who play soldiers as what they were, Kids in uniforms, making choices they don't understand, and praying they'll live with them. The film was shot in freezing weather, with the cast enduring real snowstorms, chapped faces, and more than a few close calls with hypothermia. Critics who discovered it praised the movie's restraint and its refusal to fall into the usual traps. Historians highlight how A Midnight Clear captures the chaos, mistrust, and bleak humor of a war that chewed up innocence as fast as it did armies. If you want the front lines stripped of glamour, this is your ticket. War and Remembrance, 1988-89. What if a single movie tried to capture the whole, messy, terrifying sprawl of World War II, the battles, the betrayals, the secret love affairs, and the nightmare of the Holocaust itself? War and Remembrance did just that. But it took 12 epic episodes, a monster cast, and a budget that would make most movie studios sweat bullets. This Emmy-winning miniseries was the boldest gamble in television history, with major studio backing, real locations across Europe, and a cast packed with legends: Robert Mitchum, Jane Seymour, John Gielgud, and a dozen more. The story sweeps from Pearl Harbor to Auschwitz, from the White House to battlefields nobody ever wanted to revisit, blending real events with the fictional Henry family, who seemed to run into history at every turn. The production recreated Auschwitz in excruciating detail and filmed on location in Europe, making critics and survivors alike shudder at its realism. It didn't shy away from the darkness, showing both the scope and the horror of the war, including the Holocaust, in ways that network TV had never dared. Historians give War and Remembrance huge respect for its ambition, its refusal to flinch, and its commitment to the facts, even when the truth was almost too hard to watch. If you want a war story that doesn't let you look away, this is the one to marathon. Hanover Street, 1980. Every era needs its sweeping romance, and Hanover Street delivers with a backdrop of bombs, spy missions, and impossible choices. Harrison Ford stars as an American bomber pilot who falls for a British nurse played by Leslie Ann Down, just as the Blitz is setting London on fire. What sounds like a formula romance quickly becomes something much sharper, as Ford is drawn into a dangerous spy plot and forced to partner with the husband of the woman he loves, who has no idea his marriage is on the line. Shot on real wartime airfields and over the rooftops of London, the film's flying scenes have a punch that CGI can never match. Critics at the time were split, some loving the melodrama, others rolling their eyes at the love triangle, but historians and aviation buffs have come around to it, thanks to the realistic air combat, the period, accurate details, and the way the film captures the sense of living on borrowed time. Hanover Street doesn't pretend that war is just a backdrop for romance. It lets the danger and uncertainty seep into every frame. If you want a movie where love is as risky as flying into flak, buckle up. This one aims straight for the heart. The Bunker, 1981. Ever wonder what it was like in Hitler's last days? The Bunker brings you inside those concrete walls for a front-row seat to the collapse of the Third Reich. Anthony Hopkins leads a powerhouse cast as Hitler, and his performance is nothing short of terrifying, paranoid, volatile, and disturbingly human. This wasn't some quick cash-in. The movie was based on real testimonies from survivors who were actually there in those last desperate hours. The production team built a faithful replica of the Führer bunker and spent months in dark, claustrophobic sets, pushing actors to the brink to get that feeling of doom. No flashy battles or heroics here, just arguments, panic, and the sick realization that the end is coming and nobody's in control. Hopkins refused to make his Hitler a monster or a joke. Instead, he plays him as a man unraveling, surrounded by loyalists losing faith and enemies closing in. Critics at the time were shocked by the psychological realism and the way the movie refused to flinch from the details. Historians still point to The Bunker as one of the most accurate dramatizations of the Nazi collapse. Watching it, you won't feel sympathy, but you might understand how evil hides in human panic and failure. It's not comfortable, but it's unforgettable. The Dirty Dozen, Next Mission, 1985. What happens when you bring back the most ragtag squad in movie history? The Dirty Dozen, Next Mission isn't just a sequel, It's a reunion, decades after the original made World War II look like a wild, muddy brawl. Lee Marvin returns as Major Reisman, leading a new batch of criminals-turned-soldiers on another impossible mission behind enemy lines. The rules are the same: follow orders or face the firing squad. Shot with a tight budget but plenty of firepower, the film keeps the tension and attitude that made the original a classic. You get grizzled veterans, hot-headed rookies, and an enemy who's always one step away from catching them. The action is gritty, the humor is sharp, and nobody's guaranteed a happy ending. What makes this film pop for historians and fans is how it keeps the same reckless, desperate energy as the first, while doubling down on the unpredictable chaos of real special ops during the war. Even as a made-for-TV movie, it packs more punch than half the big-budget war flicks of the decade. If you ever wondered what happens when the rules break down and only survival matters, Next Mission is your answer: loud, dirty, and unfiltered. To End All Wars 1986. You think you know what suffering looks like in a war movie? To End All Wars will push that line even further. Based on real memoirs from Allied POWs who built the infamous Death Railway in Burma, this film is not afraid to show just how far people will go to survive and what they'll sacrifice along the way. Robert Carlyle and Kiefer Sutherland star in a brutal, sometimes uplifting story about British and American soldiers facing starvation, disease, and constant brutality from their captors. The real kicker is how the prisoners struggle not just to stay alive, but to hold on to some shred of dignity, education, and hope. Filmed in rough conditions in Scotland and Thailand, the cast endured everything from leeches to tropical storms. The crew wanted authenticity, and they got it in spades. Critics didn't always know what to do with the film's focus on forgiveness and brotherhood, but historians appreciate its faithfulness to the source material and the testimony of survivors. This isn't just about the violence of war, it's about what you find out about yourself when the violence seems never-ending. To End All Wars doesn't flinch, doesn't sugarcoat, and doesn't give you easy answers. That's exactly why it sticks with you. War stories aren't just born on the big screen. Sometimes the boldest truths sneak onto your TV after dark. So, do you think these legendary TV movies and miniseries deserve a spot alongside cinema's greatest, or should the list stick to theater-only blockbusters? Drop your take in the comments. Hit subscribe for more film debates, and share this with a friend who loves a good historical argument. Which war story left the biggest impact on you?